Tonight, still waiting on a recount in Terra Nova, the Peninsulas. We'll have that story. And
in first place, with 77.48% of the vote, John Hogan. Please join me in congratulating the new leader of the Liberal Party of Newfoundland and Labrador and the next Premier of our province.
John Hogan has won the Liberal leadership and will lead his party into the next election.
You're not alone. You're not going to be a flicker in the darkness. We're all here, and we're all going to be hopeful that together we'll have a brighter tomorrow.
The May snowflakes brought most of the event indoors. I'm Colleen Connors. I'll take you inside the Halibut Community Centre for a very emotional ceremony to mark Red Dress Day.
It was very disheartening to see we have people paying from $1,200 to $1,400 Canadian for a round-trip ticket to St. John's just to have some medical appointments done.
Labrador feels left out of the tourism loop. More reaction tonight to the province's partnership with PAL.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. Over the weekend, the Liberal Party elected the province's 15th Premier.
In second place, with 22.52% of the vote, John Abbott. And in first place, with 77.48% of the vote, John Hogan.
Well, that's the moment John Hogan found out he will be the next Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. Hogan defeated fellow Liberal MHA John Abbott, taking over 77% of the vote at Saturday's leadership convention in St. John's. The Premier-designate will take over for outgoing Premier Andrew Furey. Despite working closely with Furey during his time in office, Hogan says he'll bring a different perspective.
You know, we're all different. We come from different places. We have different backgrounds. I'm a father with a lawyer who has two kids here. That's the primary focus that makes up who I am and what I want to focus on as Premier. We have different leadership styles, of course, but I have been part of this government for 4 years, Premier Furey for 5 years, of course. And I think he's really laid the groundwork for where we need to go next. I'm very fortunate to have that as a Premier stepping into someone's shoes who's really set us up for a lot of success in the next coming number of years and decades. You look at the Churchill Falls deal, you look at the Health Accord, it's going in the right direction. As I said in my speech, people still have some frustrations with health in this province, but things are trending in the right direction.
Well, that overwhelming support for Hogan seemed to somewhat surprise John Abbott. He may have lost his second bid at the Liberal leadership, but says he still plans to run in the next provincial election.
So obviously my messaging didn't resonate as much as we thought it had. But look, that's now history. We're going to move forward, and really working with John Hogan is something I'm looking forward to doing. I plan to run in the next election, and we will again form the next majority Liberal government. Look, it's been a great opportunity. Not many people get to do that, and I've been very supported by my family, my wife in particular. We travel right throughout the province, got great reception, but here we are. The vote is in, the count is done, and now we have a new leader.
And with a new Premier selected, it didn't take long for the two opposition parties to react to the news.
It might be a new Premier, it might be a new cabinet, but it's still the same people on the other side. We have a Premier now who made it clear in this leadership race that he was going to make the shingles vaccine free for all seniors, yet during the debate on this issue by the opposition's debate on this, PMR, he didn't vote in favor of it. So we're going to be looking for definitive action from the new Premier, from Premier Hogan, on addressing the issues that will make the lives of people around us better.
That's been the problem with the Liberal government, and Mr. Hogan is inheriting these problems in that it's always been about announcements. And it's like they've been running from one crisis to another, whether it's a crisis in healthcare, a crisis in housing, a crisis in education, because there has been no plans being put in place. And then what we have is a reactionary government, and they continue to react. And that's unfortunately what this Liberal government has been doing for too long. and people are ready for a change.
Well, the vote in Terra Nova, the Peninsulas, was the tightest in all of Canada during last week's federal election. 12 votes separate the winner and loser, which means the race qualifies for an automatic recount. Heather Gillis explains why a decision can't be made overnight.
A recount can happen one of two ways. It can be requested, or if a race is really tight, one can happen automatically. For an automatic recount, the difference between the winner and the loser has to be between 1/1000th of all of the votes cast. If you can't do the math on the fly for that, neither can I. Here's an example.
If 40,000 votes were cast and there are fewer than 40 votes in the difference between each candidate, that's an automatic recount. But before a recount can happen, Elections Canada first has to validate the vote. On election night, election workers hand count each ballot. They call the numbers in to a returning officer, who then forwards them on to Election Canada's headquarters. Those results are reported online, and it's what you hear on the news. But after the dust settles, Elections Canada goes back over everything, checking for errors and discrepancies before the vote is validated or official.
After validation, if the result is still tight, a returning officer has 4 days to apply to a superior court in the electoral district. Then it'll take a few more days to find a court and a judge, and the recount can go a couple of different ways.
The judge can review all the math and tallies, or if numbers are really tight, they order every single ballot to be recounted. Judges can also make decisions on rejecting or keeping ballots that they believe to be spoiled or unclear. A recount is done in front of the candidate and their representatives. It can take days.
It's a rigorous process, all done to make sure every vote counts and that the right person heads to Ottawa and the House of Commons. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, groups in Labrador say they're feeling shortchanged by the province's new agreement with PAL Airlines. Last week, government announced it's partnering with the airline to offer more connecting flights between St. John's, Gander, and Deer Lake. It's intended to help boost tourism. But that's got some people in Labrador feeling left out of the loop. The Labrador West Chamber of Commerce says his part of the province needs a boost in tourism as much as anywhere on the island.
It's been an issue that's been ongoing here. I've lived here for 37 years of my life, and it's always been an issue. We've always felt that we were kind of left out of any provincial programming, especially when it comes to healthcare, air travel, and currently we're in a housing crisis. So, there are quite a few issues in Labrador that need to be taken care of, and we would like to see a lot more of that in the campaign run.
Well, Uber is putting out a call for more drivers as the company looks to expand its service beyond the Avalon in the coming weeks. The rideshare service says soon everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador will be able to use the app, though getting a ride will depend on just how many people sign up to get behind the wheel. A spokesperson for the American company says wait times may vary outside of the capital city, where drivers are able to pick up customers within minutes. Well, now to some news from the courts. The Tony Humby case, was back in court this morning, but his trial on charges of sexual violence against youth still hasn't begun. It was supposed to start 2 months ago, but it's been held up by a series of pretrial applications, which are continuing this week. The trial was scheduled to end in late May. Now, new dates have been added up to the end of June. Well, members of the Halibut First Nation came together this afternoon to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit people. It was an emotional ceremony for many who packed into the community center in Corner Brook for drumming, singing, and speeches.
I'm honored to be here with all of you today because you're my family. Our nation is a family, and our family, like any family, protects one another and stands by one another through good times and bad. And today's a hard day for our family because it's a reminder of challenges that we face as Indigenous people. And as an Indigenous woman, an Indigenous mother, I'm reminded daily of, the risk to me, to my children, to my little girls, because we're Indigenous. Just for that fact alone, we are at a higher risk for violence.
Hey, we are hi-oh, hi-oh, hey, hi-oh, hey.
When we stand strong in solidarity, and we have zero tolerance for overt hatred and the tearing down of good people, especially good women. So I dream of a time, and I have faith in you, my people, that together when we gather like this, we can speak our truth in circle in a good way. And I ask that each of us go home and have conversations with our families about the destructiveness, not only physical destructiveness, but the emotional and spiritual destructiveness that we continue to do to each other, and that cannot be acceptable.
Many of us within the queer community of Corner Brook and Bay of Islands are indigiqueer. For those not familiar with the term, it is an intersection of Indigenous and queer communities. We use this term to acknowledge and celebrate the unique experiences and challenges faced by Indigenous 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples. I think having us included here opens that to people within the Indigenous community and the queer community to know that you're not alone, you're not going to be a flicker in the darkness. We're all here, and we're all going to be hopeful that together we'll have a brighter tomorrow.
Well, 22,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians served in the Second World War, and yesterday a parade at the National War Memorial in downtown St. John's was held to commemorate the end of the Battle of the Atlantic, which included a prayer and wreath-laying ceremony.
This is the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and also the commemoration of the Battle of the Atlantic. 22,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians served during the Second World War. These were young men from Newfoundland and Labrador who went off to fight for our freedom. And remember, back then, of course, we were not part of Canada. My father served in the 59th Newfoundland Heavy Regiment in the defense of England, and I had a great uncle who was actually the captain of an escort ship who was lost at sea. So it spans both connections. There were some children here today, and looking around, I've seen other family members from people who served during the war as well. So it's wonderful to see them turn out to honor those from Newfoundland who served. We have members of the 2 artillery regiments who are buried across England, France, the Netherlands, North Africa, and Italy. We have thousands who are lost in total. Our freedom today is derived from what they did 80 years ago today.
So here's what we've gathered from talking to local residents.
I spoke with a renter who's facing eviction this fall.
It is not for the weak of stomachs.
What does it mean for you to be able to give that advice and to know that you've helped?
Don't look down.
If this is something that you didn't know about, let me tell you.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
St. John's.
Corner Brook.
Shaji, Inuk First Nation.
Grand Falls, Windsor.
New West Valley, Newfoundland and Labrador.
A nice day shaping up for Tuesday across the province, but a breezy one, especially across the island. Your full forecast details are coming up.
Is it a little gross?
I mean, it's definitely better than having it go to the landfill.
Well, how does the biggest mall in the province deal with tons of food court waste? The answer is just ahead.
It is time for the weather. Carl is out and about.
Yes, there are a lot of folks here in the Avalon Mall cinemas playing chess.
How do you do, sir?
Here and now, reporter Zach Gowdy will go anywhere for a good story. And tonight, Zach is taking us inside the province's biggest composter. But it's not at Robin Hood Bay or at a recycling center. It's right outside the food court at the Avalon Mall.
Is it a little gross?
I mean, it's compost, so it's not exactly the cleanest at all times, but you know, it is definitely better than having it go to the landfill.
Maybe the widest variety of food in Newfoundland and Labrador is right here at the food court in the Avalon Mall. But that means this place generates a tremendous amount of food waste. Now, there is no organic waste processing here in Newfoundland and Labrador, but the Avalon Mall has figured out how to do it themselves. And today, they're going to show us how. Let's follow the donut.
Food scraps from the customers dining in the food court are the largest proportion of what we collect here. They're collected and stored in bins via our tray valet stations. We also have provided all of our food court retailers with 5-gallon buckets for them to collect their scraps and any leftover food at the end of the day. Hi, my name is Jamie Stroh. I'm property manager for Avalon Mall. And right now we are standing in front of our composter just outside the food court entrance.
That is the biggest composter I have ever seen. Introduce us to this machine.
All right, so this is a brome in-vessel composter. Takes about 7 to 10 days to work it through from start to finish. They are broken down a little bit with the mixer and the screw feeder at first. They're then fed into the machine, but then once they get inside, the temperature helps further that decomposition process. So heat is generated from the natural breakdown of the materials. All of that material is what we consider our nitrogen or organic material, because the recipe for proper compost requires both carbon and nitrogen. We use the paper materials from the food court. They also go in to supplement the compost mixture, also helping obviously to reduce the amount of waste that's going to the landfill.
So do you know how much food is going into this machine and being diverted from the landfill in the process?
Yes, so at peak seasons, we can generate up to 1,300 pounds in a couple of days. We have, on average, accumulated about 6,000 pounds a month. And in total, since we launched the program in October of 2019, we've collected over 300,000 pounds of organic waste.
300,000 pounds? And before this, that was all going?
All going to the landfill. At the landfill, your food materials will go and they rot, which produces a methane gas, versus when it's composted, you don't have that. Once it comes at the end, it's not quite ready to go put on your garden. So we have Island Compost come and collect the materials roughly every 3 to 4 weeks. They take the trailer, they take the piles to their fields to finish the curing process. After that, they then distribute the compost material to various farms across Newfoundland and Labrador to be used as topsoils.
So the little piece of a hamburger that I don't finish here at the Avalon Mall, that becomes...
It goes right back into the agriculture for Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'm sure most people just drive by and see a fence and they don't even think about what's behind it. But what do you think about? What do you think about this machine and what happens here?
I'm very proud that we have this machine on site. I think the sustainable efforts that Avalon Mall has invested in and that Crombie supports are great for the shopping center, are great for the community, and I hope that it inspires others to follow suit.
There's a lot of misinformation about who Pierre Poilievre is and what he stands for. And I think people believed everything that they had read without fact checking. You know, a number of times I would ask people to fact check what they thought was the real Pierre Poilievre, and they'd come back and apologize and realize, you know, this is a committed individual.
Well, David Brazel there, the Conservative candidate in St. John's East, speaking on his election loss and what he calls misconceptions about Pierre Poilievre. On Power and Politics with David Cochrane, you can catch that conversation on our website, cbc.ca/NL.
Time for a look at your full weather forecast. Ryan Snodden in for Ashley this evening, and let's have a look at our high temperatures today. Struggling somewhat compared to where we will be here over the next couple of days, as those temperatures are going to be rising. 12, one of the hot spots in and around the metro area, and you can see struggling in the 0 to 3 range, northern peninsula up into Labrador, and in fact -1. The high from Nain back through Churchill Falls and Lab City at +1 today. As we look back to the south and west, though, we are watching this milder air that's going to be moving in with these southwest winds that will be pretty breezy as we turn the page into Tuesday. And yeah, watching some unsettled weather to follow, though, as you can see a couple of lows that are going to be moving their way up and into the region. First and foremost, forecast temperatures for tonight. We're, for the most part, going to be below the freezing mark. A slight risk for a shower. The Avalon back towards the Bonavista Peninsula over the next couple of hours. That moving out, and also looking at a chance for some flurries up towards Nain on the leading edge of this warm frontal boundary, and you can see that pushing in there across the north coast. By the time we get to Tuesday morning, that has pushed out into the Labrador Sea. Nice bright start across the province, and that southwest flow, though, already starting to pick up, and it will be quite breezy, particularly across the Avalon and up the northeast coast and into the Strait and across the northern peninsula, where we're talking about gusts in the 60, 70, even 80 kilometer per hour range. Note the clouds starting to build in here to Labrador into the afternoon. On the doorstep for Newfoundland, but it looks like, for the most part, just a few clouds ahead of this system. And how about those temperatures? Much nicer, much milder for Tuesday. We're going to be ranging between 12 degrees, or around 12 degrees, I should say, for the Avalon and the Burin Peninsula and the Bonavista. Single digits along that south coast in that onshore wind, but inland into the double digits. And 13 to 17, Corner Brook back through Grand Falls, Badger towards Gander, and Clarenville right likely around 15 degrees for tomorrow. And how about Happy Valley Goose Bay, 18 degrees, Cartwright at 15, and Lab City at 13. But again, those southwest winds are going to be breezy, picking things up at 8 a.m., and you can see here as we time things out, those gusts picking up by lunchtime, widespread gusts to 50 kilometers per hour in the northeast of the island, and those gusts in and around the 70 to 80 kilometer per hour range for the Strait and the northern peninsula, funneling through the Strait there on Tuesday afternoon, easing somewhat into Tuesday evening. Now, watch as this front does move through. Certainly draping clouds across the province by Wednesday morning. We're looking at a chance for showers from the get-go for the northern peninsula, and certainly back into Labrador, with some light accumulation possible Tuesday night into Wednesday morning for the north coast. And then you can see for Wednesday afternoon that chance for showers starting to work its way into western Newfoundland, staying dry, but certainly increasing clouds for central and east, and some snow and possibly some freezing rain setting up here across the Mealy Mountain area. Note temperatures near 20 for central Newfoundland on Wednesday, ahead of the system as that warmer air builds in, just 2 and 3 degrees on the other side of this. And note, yes, the possibility of some snow and freezing rain accumulating across southern Labrador Wednesday night and through Thursday. We'll keep you posted on this, but yes, could see some snow, especially through that Eagle River stretch of the Trans-Labrador Highway, so a heads up on that. Note temperatures staying mild right into Thursday with those showers building in, and then temperatures cooling off for Friday with another chance for showers moving back in for Saturday. You can see that central Newfoundland looking particularly damp for Thursday. Beautiful day on Wednesday ahead of that system with those building clouds. Now for western parts of Newfoundland, again, that chance for showers building in Wednesday afternoon. This is not going to be a washout by any stretch, but we will be watching for that shower activity to build in through the afternoon. Cooler on Friday, and again, that wet weather building back in on Saturday. And I did, as I said, Wednesday, showers moving into Happy Valley Goose Bay in eastern Labrador, but a heads up that south of Goose Bay, it does look like the possibility again across the Trans-Labrador Highway that we could see some accumulating snow for Wednesday night and into early Thursday before that system starts to pull away. And as we look at the western parts of Labrador, looking at that chance for Very chilly showers, just 3 degrees on Wednesday. Brightening back up towards the end of the week. Another chance for showers back in the mix for Saturday. That is your forecast to now. Carolyn, back to you.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Well, staying in Labrador, the president of the Labrador West Chamber of Commerce is another on a growing list of Labradorians who are upset about the intra-provincial travel loop announced last week. Government made a deal with PAL Airlines to increase flights between St. John's, Gander and Deer Lake over the summer months. Now, government says it's spending $15 million for tourism marketing and air access. David Hall says government should be working harder to make air travel to and from Labrador more affordable. He spoke with the CBC's Daryl Din.
As you know, the president of Labrador West Chamber of Commerce and a resident of Labrador, it was very disheartening to see Labrador left out of this tourism funding that they have, while we're here struggling to even get the basics, when in the sense of we have people paying from $1,200 to $1,400 Canadian for a round trip ticket to St. John's just to have some medical appointments done. And I will say that we've had a great relationship with Provincial Airlines and have worked with them very closely over the last 18 months on things like compassionate rates, student rates, of course medical rates and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's not the airline's job to vouch for the people of Labrador, which they have been doing, but our government really needs to step up and make some plans to help us out here in this part of the province.
And the Labrador West Chamber, as well as the Happy Valley Goose Bay Chamber, both wrote a letter. Did the government respond to your letters?
There was no response yet. I do believe Minister Crocker has been on and made some comments. And, you know, to the tune of this was a tourism fund, and it wasn't really meant to help with affordable airline tickets and stuff like that. But, you know, at the same time, we have quite the diversity here of tourist attractions when it comes to our our recreational activities, from snowmobiling to kayaking to our beautiful walking trails. We feel we were left out on that tourism side of things as well.
And with the $15 million being spent for the island route, is there just wishing that was prioritized more for residents first?
Yeah, and I stress that we would love to see more emphasis put on the basics that the residents of the province and Labrador specifically and their needs. So when it comes now, the 15 million, I believe it was 2 million that was earmarked for this. They call it a top-up, I guess. So basically, they've added this new route between Deer Lake and Gander to create this loop. And depending on PAL's revenues, if they hit their revenue target, then they don't need to top it up. But what's happening with the other 13 million, I guess it remains to be seen. But we would like to see some of that invested in tourism for Labrador as well. We also think that the province needs to get better at announcing these programs provincially wide instead of just portions of the province. It does make a lot of the other residents feel left out in a lot of the other regions. And we have a lot of them outside of Gander, Deer Lake, and St. John's, right? And anyone who's running for provincial leadership or regional leadership, this should be a big talking point for you. It's been an issue that's been ongoing here. I've lived here for 37 years of my life, and it's always been an issue. We've always felt that we were kind of left out of any provincial programming, especially when it comes to healthcare, air travel, and currently we're in a housing crisis. So, you know, there are quite a few issues in Labrador that need to be taken care of, and we would like to see a lot more of that in the campaign run.
Well, on Friday, former PC party leader and Conservative candidate David Brazil joined Power and Politics host David Cochrane to talk about Pierre Poilievre. Brazil,
an unsuccessful Conservative candidate in Newfoundland and Labrador, says Poilievre was a bit of an obstacle for his campaign. David Brazil, who ran for the Conservatives in St. John's East, joins me now. David Brazil, it's been a long time. It's a very good interview again. Thanks for being here, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for having me back again.
I saw your comments on VOCM after the election saying that Pierre Poilievre was an issue for you at the doors. What exactly were people saying to you, and how do you think it affected the race?
Well, at the end of the day, people were supportive of me. They didn't really understand what Pierre stood for and some of the policies that the party had. There was a lot of misinformation about who Pierre Poilievre is and what he stands for. And I think people believed everything that they had read without fact checking. A number of times I would ask people to fact check what they thought was the real Pierre Poilievre, and they'd come back and apologize and realize, this is a committed individual, great leadership skills, committed to this country, committed to his family, wanting to do good for people. But the information, the way it was portrayed, somewhere along the way, somebody dropped the ball and didn't get the real information out about who Pierre Poilievre was and what he stood for. And that had an impact with people, particularly in the urban areas and particularly in St. John's East, at least in my election.
Well, what was the misinformation, though, Dave Brazil? I mean, he has been the main character in Canadian politics for 2.5 years, driving the news agenda, and no one silenced him. What was it that people didn't seem to get about Pierre Poilievre in St. John's East?
Well, again, the clarification on that he was, anti-women's rights, that he was anti-LGBTQ plus community, that he was anti-affordable daycare, that he was anti-pharmacare, these type of things versus what was really the discussion around. It's one thing if you vote against something, but if there's a rational reason for it, that information didn't get out. I mean, there was discussions in the House of Commons about why, the Conservative Party didn't support certain components or certain pieces of legislation. That never got clarified, so people would understand that the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre were supportive of the needs of Canadians. So that didn't get clarified. That's a messaging that I think needs to be reviewed again. And somebody needs to make decisions on how they get their message out and talk about the true issues that were facing Canadians at the time and explain to them that the Conservative Party was very supportive of what Canadians said were their priorities. And that's what I heard. Unfortunately, in a 5-week election, it takes a lot of time to clarify every issue and every policy that the leader's spoken to over the last number of years.
But, they would pull out these programs in filibusters of budgets line by line to vote against them, in estimates, and would never really commit to keeping some of them or expanding them at the rate that they are intended to grow. So, I mean, is it unfair to draw the conclusion that maybe they wouldn't have gone as far with pharmacare as Mark Carney will or dental care as Mark Carney will, and even talked about only honoring the childcare deals until the end of the existing arrangements and then changing them to a more conservative vision of things?
Well, I mean, that may have been the reality or it may have been the discussion, but I know the discussions I had with Pierre, when I was leader of the Progressive Conservative Party here the last 3.5 years about policies that were relevant to Newfoundland and Labrador. And every one of them were similar to that. And he was very supportive. We talked about why they didn't support a certain piece of legislation, but did talk about alternatives that would be just as good or even more enhancing as part of that process. So, maybe they should have clarified that better. They should have probably had more open discussions with the stakeholders as part of that. I think one of the issues here was about the communications. And that to me was the biggest issue I faced was people's misunderstanding of or clarity on what the issues were that the Conservatives stood for and what Pierre Poilievre himself believed in. And a lot of the things that Pierre believed in are things that I've seen most of the constituents here talk about over the last number of years.
Right. So, because, part of the problem is interviews like this weren't allowed to happen for a long time. I know you did an all-candidates debate, I believe, with my colleague Chrissy Holmes, and I saw that and I was like, does Central Headquarters know David Brazil's doing an all-candidates debate? Because candidates are told not to do those things. So, if you're saying people don't know what your party stands for, but they're not allowed to do interviews, suddenly we're talking to Conservatives all the time in the show, but for 2 years, they weren't allowed to come on, they weren't allowed to do interviews, you're told not to do local media, you're told not to do local debates. If you want people to know what you're about, you got to tell them what you're about and show up, don't you? Doesn't that really need to change here?
100%, and I did 15 different debates and 17 interviews. Because how do we get our message out, particularly if there's misinformation, to clarify exactly, what our leader stands for, what the Conservative Party stands for, if we don't get to use the mediums we have. And mainstream medium is one of the biggest ones to be able to clarify exactly what the issues are. So, I didn't agree with that. I didn't follow it. As part of the process, I thought what an opportunity, particularly a lot of the policies that were announced, not only were beneficial to everybody in Newfoundland and Labrador, but for all Canadians. I don't think the message got out enough because we didn't use the full mainstream avenues we had at our disposal. To me, that was one of the faults with what's happened, particularly in this campaign, that we didn't get the message out the way we could have, or use the medium to get to the masses. And people went with what they were told by other parties or the misinformation they had from social media. Right. And I think that hurt a lot of candidates across the country.
Well, staying with politics, as Andrew Furey's time as Premier comes to an end, members of the Liberal Party and a few other familiar faces came together over the weekend to pay tribute to Newfoundland and Labrador's 14th Premier.
Andrew, my friend, congratulations. Thanks for being such an extraordinary partner, an extraordinary Premier, and a great friend.
The first time I met Andrew Furey, I walked over to him in a Premier's meeting and I said, "Hi, I'm Dennis from PEI." He shook my hand and he said, "Hi, I'm Andrew. You're going to need a hip replacement." That's Andrew Furey, always drumming up business for his home province.
You've done so much for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you. Buddy, I have lots of memories that I can't share with everyone on this video, but I can't wait to see you again. God bless you and your family. And I know whatever you do moving forward, knees, hips, eyeballs, toenails, whatever you deal with, you're going to be a champion.
Well, tonight you are all saying goodbye to Dad as Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. We, as his family, are saying, welcome home, Dad. Please join us in welcoming the 14th Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador.
The view from the 8th floor of the Confederation building is special. And many times I caught myself just looking towards the Narrows, towards Signal Hill. This job in this place at this time, I feel incredibly blessed to have helped pen another chapter in our province's history. Standing on Dwight's shoulders, we have turned things around. We have built such positive momentum. And now it will become someone else's turn to pick it up from here, to keep pushing forward. I truly, from the bottom of my heart and with every fiber of my being, wish them every bit of success. For their wins are all our wins. Now for me, as Dennis suggested, surgery awaits. It's true, he was limping when I saw him, by the way. I'll still be serving the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, but I know this. I don't need a seat or a title to always stand up for the people of this truly magical corner of Canada, to always stand on guard for Newfoundland and Labrador, and I always will. To the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, thank you, and God guard thee, Newfoundland and Labrador.
The search for two missing children in a rural Nova Scotia enclave has entered its 4th day. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were last seen Friday morning. The children are believed to have wandered away from their home in Pictou County. Police and search teams have been combing the area. Rainy conditions have made their efforts more challenging. The public has been urged to stay away to allow trained crews to thoroughly search the wooded areas. Well, heavy rain and flash flooding in Jordan forced hundreds of tourists to be evacuated from the ancient city of Petra. A video released by tourism officials shows water gushing down the towering cliffs. The archaeological site is one of the most recognized and popular attractions in the region. The iconic facade carved into the sandstone, known as the Treasury, has been featured in several movies, including Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. O'Donnell High School in Mount Pearl was filled with music this morning as hundreds of students from schools around the city came together to celebrate Music Monday. The CBC stopped by to take in some tunes.
We have brought together 350 students from every school in Mount Pearl to come together to celebrate Music Monday. So a bit of history about Music Monday is that it was designed by the Coalition for Music to celebrate music education and everything that music has to offer. it's not a competition, so we've just come together to share. We're very supportive, and it's so nice to hear just the enthusiasm and the vibrancy that music brings today.
I feel like just music brings out like emotions, and like it's a good way to like relieve yourself from and calm yourself down, and yeah, it's fun.
I play the saxophone. I love the saxophone so much. I find it so smooth to play, and the sound is amazing, and I love being able to do all the nice kind of riffs.
Music education is so important for a number of reasons, not just for music making, that's obviously one big benefit, and making music accessible to everybody. But it also teaches us so much about social skills, emotional regulation. It helps to improve our learning in other subject areas such as math and science and social studies as well. And so it's just a great subject for us to not only explore our talents, to take risks and things like that, but make connections with other areas of our learning.
All right, a final check of your forecast for tonight, and let's circle back to the forecast for tonight and into Tuesday morning. Now, we will see a chance for a shower for the next couple of hours here across the northeast and into the metro area, but that kicking out by the time we get to Tuesday morning. Also a chance for a flake along the north coast of Labrador. That pushes out into the Labrador Sea. Lots of sunshine on tap for Tuesday, some increasing clouds into the afternoon and evening for western parts of Labrador, then building into central. But the island looks really, really nice on Tuesday, although the winds are going to be howling for tomorrow, gusting 50, 60 kilometers per hour for most of the island. And right here through the strait, we're going to be seeing some gusts funneling up towards 60, 70, and even 80 kilometers per hour, northern peninsula into the southeast of Labrador. So a heads up on that. But you can see, Happy Valley Goose Bay up to 18 degrees. That mildest of air pushes in and across Newfoundland for Wednesday when we're flirting with 20 degrees from Badger to Grand Falls, Windsor. That's likely going to be our hot spot. 17 possible in Gander, back towards St. John's into the low teens. And you can see that wet weather and, yes, snow building in to northern parts of Labrador, and keeping an eye on this setup. So the colder air on the northern edge of this system with moisture feeding in, that's where we're looking at the possibility of a few flakes by late day Wednesday in through Happy Valley Goose Bay as this wet weather starts to push in across the island. And then, as we can see here, into the southeast by the time we get to Thursday morning, that stretch of the Trans-Labrador Highway could be snow covered, particularly the higher terrain areas in the southeast. So we're watching that closely. Does look like for the most part this is going to be south of Happy Valley Goose Bay, but I do think the strait and down into the northern peninsula by Thursday evening could see a few flakes flying as well. Note the temperatures cooling off toward the end of the week across all of the island, and Friday maybe even some single-digit temperatures wrapping in around the backside of this system, particularly in through the Bay of Exploits with that cooler air coming right in off the water. We'll see wet weather, of course, on Thursday across the island. Again, single-digit possibilities for the west on Friday as well, with a chance for showers back in on Saturday. And as you can see for Happy Valley Goose Bay, Eastern Labrador, again, temperatures falling through Wednesday, so some late day flakes possible here into Wednesday night. And then Thursday, not so bad for Happy Valley Goose Bay in the north coast, but the southeast may see some snow there on Thursday. Wednesday in Lab West, pretty cool rain with maybe ending as a few flakes, but back into some sunshine for Thursday and Friday. That is your forecast to now. Carolyn?
Thank you so much, Ryan. Yes, thanks so much to Ryan for filling in for Ashley tonight. It's always nice to see an old friend. Well, that's it for us on this Monday evening. For news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/nl. Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us.